Hey, welcome to Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean. I'm your host. What is Conscious Conversations? It's a podcast that talks to people that I've caught up with, that I've read about, that I'm following, that I try to contact them and unpack their story and talk a little bit about what they're about and their learnings, their insights and their teachings, and share that story with you guys. And hopefully you walk away with a great conversation, but some insights and some tools and resources that you can take with you for your personal journey. And don't we need it more than ever in this particular time? You know, I live in Victoria and we've just got into our stage 3 and 4 lockdown again of 2.0. It's a very interesting energy that I feel being on the phone to a few people this morning of, you know, it's hard to explain, but there's a real fear, there's an uncertainty, and you know, it's really not a creative space. It's a lockdown. You know, that word lockdown I think is really important, that people aren't going to be in an expansive environment for new ideas, for participation, for connection, which is why, you know, I'm really putting a lot of energy at the moment into this podcast, and I've got some great guests coming on the podcast soon. But we need to continue to find our authentic voice. More than ever, we need to stay grounded in our values and continue on our journey and not become so conditioned and so reactive to what people are telling us to do, but still finding ourselves within that. And mindfulness and meditation, I'm a meditation teacher and a life coach, is so important that we continue to fight for that clarity, fight for our ability to be expansive, to be creative, to be loving, to be kind, and to think about others and make it bigger than just us, because we can go right into ourselves. And today I get a really great conversation with a lady called Karina Donkers, who's, you know, really, she's around earth stewardship. She's deep ecology work that she's done, social work. She's done a lot of different things, including being a yoga instructor. It's really an expansive resume, I guess, of what she's got just to make the earth a better place, to make people a better place with a better earth. And she uses a variety of modalities, I guess, to do that, to do the same thing, and we talk about that in the podcast. So this is a really grounding, natural conversation. Karina's got some great energy, and she shares her story openly, and you know, I really hope you like it. And I encourage you to keep listening to the podcast, to keep sharing the podcast, because we need a voice. We need to continue this voice. So without further ado, this is Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean, and this is my conversation with Karina Donkers. So Karina, I wanted to start because I had a look at your website and it's amazing, and I just wanted to sort of start with the question of you know, what best captures the work that you do, because you're doing quite a lot at the ecology space and at the spiritual space. I'd love to get you know, your sort of hypnosis of what captures that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is a bit broad what I do, but I think I'm using lots of different avenues to do the same thing, which is like the focus is around supporting people to come back home to themselves and the world. And then from that place of connection, be able to create change and like live on behalf of a larger whole. So that's kind of, I use different avenues for doing the exact same thing. So that might be retreats, or it might be courses and that kind of thing. It's around like utilizing different ways that people learn and people connect, and accessing different community groups to be able to support them to kind of have this deep remembering of our innate belonging to the earth.
Mm. And I love to touch on, you started that bit by talking about coming back to themselves firstly. Is that sort of your starting point when working with people and running courses, that before they can come back to the earth, that they need to firstly come back to themselves? Is that the starting point for the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it comes hand in hand. So with the work that I do, I really believe that we struggle to be able to stand for something larger than ourselves when we aren't at home within ourselves. And so,
Mm.
and to be connected to an ecological or larger self, we need to also be at home with our own bodies, because that's just an extension of the earth, or that's how deep ecology sees it, as an extension of
Yeah.
the earth. And so therefore, we need to be able to come back and understand who we are as humans, and as in humans as part of the collective, but also as part of the larger whole. And so then, yeah, it really is about like um, coming back home to ourselves, but also one another. So I kind of like say it's like coming back home to yourself, but also each other. So other people, other species, and then also coming back home to the earth. So it's like, I think it's like a three-pronged journey that people
Mm.
have to go through around reconnecting and reestablishing some of these core ways that have been innately how we've been, but we've just lost parts of it through our socialization and through the systems that we're currently living in. And so it's around, yeah, I really focus on people, men, women, any genders, any expressions, really coming back to their bodies, and then therefore reconnecting to the earth through being embodied, because we can't be connected if we're not embodied and we're not within our own body.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense. And do you find that you know holding those tensions between connection to the earth, connections to yourself, connections to other beings and other animals, do they work collectively together, Karina? I mean, and what I mean by that is, you know, do sometimes people need to connect to the earth firstly, then to find themselves? Like, do they sort of bounce off each other in that space?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not like a um, step one, step two, step three.
Mm.
Definitely, yeah, are interrelated and play into each other. Because I know that for me, a lot of the story about me coming back home to my own self um, really was supported by doing the nature work, by reconnecting to the earth, by doing that deep ecology work, really supported me in my own healing, in my own journey, and within that. So yeah, they can come hand in hand, or one after the other, or it's kind of an individual's journey within that. But I think those three components are core for us moving forward as a human race, and for us moving into the future in a way that's sustainable. I really feel like we need those facets of being able to know ourselves, but also and connect with ourselves, know each other, and be able to think in that collective, broader, and also cross like species thinking of that ecological self, as well as understanding that this earth is alive, and also we're reliant on it for our life and for our essence and our being. And so yeah, they definitely don't come one after the other. It kind of is individual based depending on where people are at in their journey. And I think that's why I offer a range of things, because people are at such different parts of their
Mm.
journey, and they also need to access it in different ways, because we're also diverse, and that's the beauty of us. But therefore, to support different groups and different types of people to come back home, like, we need to use different avenues and different approaches and different strategies to support them.
Yeah, that makes it makes a lot of sense as to why you offer the range. And it feels like the words you're saying is that there's a real deep need, and something I want to talk about today is there's a deep need to regain connectedness back to our what I'd call our true self, and others, and that we've lost that disconnection. And the work you've done in deep ecology and your own personal healing has been central to that journey. If I'm hearing you correct, and if so, I'd love for you to talk about your journey and how you got into this work and what your healing process was like for you.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, so it's a bit of a everything journey. I don't know exactly where to start, but I was, I kind of got involved with the environment stuff from quite an early age. But then when I was doing social work, I traditionally a social worker. And so when I was studying social work, I really felt like it was a element that wasn't touched on, and I saw it as really key as being a social worker who was, you know, our basis around human rights and social justice and equality and equity. And there was not a huge amount of focus on that around climate change and the impacts of that, and the most vulnerable community is going to be impacted by that. And so that was kind of where I first saw how we segregate. Well, not where I first saw, but where I found it really evident how we separate out everything from the environment. It's like social workers over here don't deal with climate change, even though I see them as like so incredibly interlinked. And that's not to say that, you know, more and more that field is stepping into that space. But I really saw that wherever I looked, sorry, wherever I looked, there was people who, places that were this separation of us or whatever field of interest and the environment over there, instead of it being integrated as it is and as the reality is that, you know, it's relevant to any field that you're working in, it's relevant to any life that we're a part of and any journey that we're a part of. But it's always been that kind of separated view of how people have spoken about it. And so after then, I kind of like I did my course and I started being a social worker, and I was working in mental health and different areas like that. And I found that I was more and more pulled towards the larger picture and how the impact of climate change on that broadest perspective, and working on that community development, climate justice space. And from following threads, like I'm really encourage people to follow threads of life, because I think that's how I've kind of come to where I am, is I just kind of saw some threads and kept pulling at them and kept on following that until I really found the deep ecology field and fell into that space. But also around that journey wasn't so much about me wanting to professionally do it, but me seeking it out because I had this yearning inside of me where I felt this great disconnection, and I felt like there was something more, but I couldn't, you know, when you can feel something, but you can't quite grasp it, but you know that it must exist, or you hope that it exists. But until you experience it, it seems like this fantasy idea.
Well, sorry, Carol, I think, and what you're saying is so true, because and what I mean by that is, like, you're doing the social work, and I'm listening to this, and you're doing this social work, but even the social work and the framework around social work is to put things into boxes. So don't overlap nature work with social work. Social work's in its own box, and we naturally in society, it sounds like we're creating these disconnections. We're wanting to disconnect everything and separate everything. And your journey to follow threads to build these connections and feel that nature has something to do with mental health, and the deep ecology and connection to that, which thousands of years ago, that's all there was, is to do with well-being. And you've actually been able to follow those threads. Is that correct? Where I think a lot of people, because they've created so many separations in their life, can't even find these threads these days to connect them up yet.
Mm. Yeah, I think we're offered these threads, but not encouraged to follow them.
Yeah, yeah.
Then they become missed opportunities for us to be able to engage with the unknown. So for me, it's always been the gray area, or the unknown, or that something more has always been very intriguing for me. And I've really lent into the discomfort of the unknown and the uncertainty of being not in the boxes, because there's a big safety that people, like a false sense of safety that we develop by thinking that we belong in this certain box, and we can be identified, and we can identify as, you know, whatever it might be, a social worker or an accountant or a, you know, compared to being able to lean into the discomfort and the uncertainty of going, well, life isn't that black and white, that there's so much gray complexity, and there's such beauty in that. And I think that's where I'm trying to come from with my work, is I don't really see my work as, just deep ecology or just social work or just yoga. I see it as the integration of the things that I have found most powerful and most useful for my journey and for other people I've supported in that journey, and my learnings along the way. And that's just like any healthy ecosystem. It's the diversity of all of the different parts of it. And I think we've kind of not we've kind of become quite fearful of not fitting into a certain box. So and I think right at the moment we're being challenged as a society, because a lot of our identities that we have relied on, a lot of the boxes that we have felt safe in, are being stripped away due to the circumstances of COVID, but also of a changing climate. It's like and so for me, I really think that the threads that I've followed around my own healing, but also around my development and the work that I want to do, have been around being okay not knowing everything, and being okay around not knowing where that thread will go, and not belonging in any box. And there's a beauty and a power in that. And more people are slowly stepping into that diversity of complexity. And I think that really serves us when it looks at how we're going to move forward, because we need to have people who are really challenging themselves and expanding outwards to be able to address these complex issues.
Yeah, well, yeah, and what you said then, that false sense of safety, and the for so many people, that's I feel the boxes and the work you're doing, that the boxes that we're living in might be safe, but there's a deep undercurrent of discontent in those boxes that aren't fulfilling in our life, and but still feeling probably, again, scared to go against the stream and lean into that discomfort, and understanding that discomfort and sometimes those challenging moments are actually where the growth comes from, and we don't grow a lot in really safe, prescribed environments. And the work that I've seen with what you're doing and trying to create that movement is constant. And I'm wondering, with you and your journey, is like, you talk about ecosystems and diversity, and what I also know about ecosystems is they're in a constant state of change. And is that what you feel like your journey is? It's gone from sort of social work to deep ecology to yoga to activism, that your personal ecosystem is just growing diversity in a continual state of change and growth. Is that sort of how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. I think my my kind of love of myself, but also my distaste of myself, is that I'm forever adapting and changing, which is, I think, really positive in this time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it you kind of are like, oh, wouldn't it be nice just to stay still and not do the constant shift. But I think that's where we're at, is like we need to be changing and growing. And I think you need to have, I think it requires you to kind of surrender into the mystery, the greater mystery, and go, I don't know it all. I'm just doing the best I can at the moment, and continuously trying to work step by step to be the best human and to leave the most beautiful impact I can on this earth. And I think that's the best we can do. But by doing that, each step, there's that different layer of growth and different layer of change that you have to, because we are in this amazingly complex system. But also right now, at this point in history, there is so much change. And I think that we do need to be adaptable beings to be able to move through all this, and to come together, because it really requires that.
And what do you see, Karina, as like, for a person that's probably feeling that need to step into their authentic self and feeling like they need to do something, what do you see as that first step for someone? Like, where do you sort of meet them at?
As in when people are wanting to start the journey, is that what you
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you get someone that's maybe even listening to this that it resonates, like what would your advice be for someone then as to sort of start to take that next step to connect back to their themselves?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. It's really individual dependent, but
Yeah.
I think I think the first step for me is really honoring that within yourself and going,
Mm,
okay, when you really open up to what's happening at this time and there's this kind of alive discomfort in our body or this yearning for something more, and that a lot of people reflect back. I hear this mirrored in a lot of people's conversations. There's like, I want, I can feel, I really feel like there's something more, or I'm feeling really discontent or uncomfortable with how things are going in the world at the moment. And so those things I hear mirrored a lot. And I think the first step is like honoring that, because what that is telling you is that something is not sitting right. And that is one of the first parts of change, is acknowledging that there's something that needs to change. Because if we don't acknowledge and honor those feelings, then we just go back into that numbing business as usual mentality and way of being, and we just continue as we are. And so, first of all, I just say, honor that. That is valid. And that is also part of your larger ecological self coming alive. Like that sense of something's not okay in the larger whole, like that little inkling or large inkling or bodily response, that is your body saying, like, waking up. And that is beautiful. So I think like honoring it and also acknowledging the importance of that. And then looking at how you might, you can, there's lots of different things, but I really suggest that people look at connecting in with the earth more, but also to kind of reestablish where they that sense of connection, because a lot of ourselves that we've parts of ourselves that we have lost, we can find when we reconnect with the earth. But also, yeah, looking at different ways of teachers and courses and coaching and spaces that people can link in to get some guidance, because what we used to have in society was the structure of the elders that would then
mm,
support us through these major transitions, and these times of uncertainty and these times of self-discovery, and we don't have that. And so as much in and I'm talking in regards to being a non-Aboriginal person, and not having that elder structure as much in that Western society. And so yeah, I really honor that that still is alive in lots of other cultures. But within the one that I live in, doesn't have a lot of those structures of those elders. And that's a key role that they played. And so it's okay to also go, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm feeling lost. And I feel like that lost, uncertain time, we always want to fix it. Cognitively, we want to fix it and like solution focused. That very the way our society is structured is like we really love that solution and structure and safety, but really allowing space for not knowing during that time. Because Bill Plockton, who is one of the authors and teachers that I really love, he speaks about that's the time of the soul, the wandering of the soul, where you and the cocoon stage, where your soul is trying to come into its expression, but it is still establishing where it fits in this larger picture. And I'm really under the belief that it's not an accident that any of us were born at this time. And I really deeply believe that every individual is incredibly and crucially important at this time, and that they have a role to play in this movement and in this like consciousness shift and in this environmental shift and in this shift towards a future that hopefully supports life. Like I think every individual has a key role in that, and it's not a coincidence that they were born during this time, that their souls kind of chose this time to be alive, because they have something to offer. And so that uncertainty, yeah, sorry, you go.
Sorry, no, it was just interesting you saying that, and I'm like resonating with that and thinking this is such an interesting time. That everything that's happening in the last sort of 6 months, but even pre that, and I'm interested to get your thoughts, Karina, in terms of like where we sit with this sort of a little bit of a waking up and an awareness of even around our device use and our technology and the environmental shift and need, and also the consciousness that's starting to happen out of the environmental. Like it is I don't think people realize it really is a pivotal time in humanity right now. And when we do wake up to that and start to get awareness to it and understand that we are in such a unique and gifted position at this particular moment to create change and almost create monumental shift for the future. Like I would love to sit in that for a minute and talk about how do we actually get people, and how do we grasp the totality of that and this moment with more substance, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. I really feel that for me, there's a lot of people feel a lot of fear about and emotions that come up when they hear that this is such a poignant time. And I really want to honor that. Those emotions are important to honor and give space to and express. And but also I think it's also around the reframing of this time. Like I really feel that this time it is such an honor to be alive. Like the fact that, like you said, this is the moments that will define humanity, not even just the future, but will define humanity. And that is, it means that we're alive during a time where our actions actually are, my view is they're even more important than they've ever been in any other parts of history, because it's like we get to decide and shift and act or not during this time. And there is this like sacredness of this responsibility to be able to be part of something larger than oneself. And so instead of like that pullback fear of, oh my God, this is a big thing, there is so much beauty and love and connection when we actually acknowledge and go, yeah, I am part of a bigger thing. And this time does matter. And when you acknowledge that, yes, there might be fear that comes up, but also alongside that comes this like deep love when you realize that you are responsible for the future generations, and that as an ancestor of future beings, that this is the most poignant time, that you are defining the landscape of their beings, and also you're defining the landscape even just of our own children at this time because of the time frame. Like this is not a small thing that we have been offered, but we can either grasp it and drop it and be terrified and run away from it, or we can like hold it in the palm of our hands with like this reverence of this beautiful sacred responsibility that actually allows us to reconnect and reestablish so many of the things that have been lost, and to come in a society, like to create a society that can hold more, that can be more connective and can heal some of the deep wounds that have been created from a system that has become so disconnected from each other and the earth. It's like we get to create something new, and that is just profoundly exciting and beautiful. So you can kind of see it in both ways, and I guess it's how we choose to look at it and how we choose to approach it.
Yeah. And you talking in that way, like I fully connect and understand, and I feel like a lot of people. That's a to actually have that view, Karina, that you've got is very spacious, and that there's a deep sense of selflessness when you talk that way, because it's about something bigger than you. And for a lot of people, I feel, that are worried about themselves, they're worried about their house, their status, their ego, that don't actually have that capacity, and you said that before, to build their capacity to actually look or think about others, and that they are full. And sometimes I feel like people are full because they haven't given anything, so they're just taking everything, and they've become full because everything's about taking, and we build capacity by giving. And that's where I think the tipping point is that ability which you're talking about, is to build capacity and to build awareness, to think beyond ourselves, our needs, in a disconnected mindset. And that's something that sits with me, and I don't have the answer, but I would love to explore the work that you're doing, especially like in the embodied earth leadership training, in how you're starting to uncover some of that and start to shift people away from me to we, I guess.
Yeah, that is a key part of the work that I'm trying to offer, is that shift. Because
Mm.
when you really feel it alive in your body, it just changes you. Like when you can feel your ecological self and that connection to the earth and connection to larger, like to the collective, um, it's a feeling. And I think what we've tried to do in this movement is we've tried to think our way through it. And I don't think we can. I think if we could, we would have. We have the solutions there. All of the solutions have been there for a very long time. Climate change is not a new topic and a new issue. It's been there for a very long time. We've had the science, and we've also had alongside it the solutions. So if logic and thinking was enough, then that would be enough. We would have already moved through that. But it's not. I think we really need to feel our way through this. And I think one of the key parts of the work that I'm offering is around being able to feel the aliveness of the earth within our bodies. And that's where the embodiment comes in for me. It's like, when we're disconnected from our bodies, we're not able to hold the complexity of these times. We're not able to hold the emotions that arise at these times, because when you really wake up to what's happening in the world, you are going to experience, elements of grief and fear and anger. And instead of suppressing them and numbing them, when we are embodied, we're able to process them, hold them, move them, and act and come back to that space of love and connection and move from that place. Because whether we acknowledge this or not, or whether we're involved with this work or not, people's bodies are feeling these feelings, and they're holding them, whether they actually acknowledge that they're there or not. And so the Embodied Earth Leadership course is really about, how do we embody change? How do we not just like create change because we have to, but how do we feel the earth and that ecological self come alive and come back home and to ourselves and our earth body, and then act from that deep space of connection and groundedness, and be able to, when we have these techniques of embodiment and connection to the earth, we are able to hold more, because we're profoundly amazing and complex beings, as is lots of other species on this planet. And I feel like we're only accessing such a small amount of our capacity. And so when we come back to this space, we are able to sit in the unknown. We're able to, and we create actions from a deep place. So instead of it feeling like, oh, I have to give up plastic because it's bad for the environment. Oh, I have to. What a sacrifice on my behalf. When you're really deeply connected to your ecological self, you just don't use plastic because it just doesn't feel like, it feels unaligned with your body. Like it just becomes an innate way of being. It's not that you're cognitively going, like, there is that part of cognitively, choosing as well, but it becomes a bodily approach. Like for me, when I do receive things that are in plastic and stuff like that, my body actually responds because it feels so deeply connected, and I can, by that element coming into my life, I know that, yes, I cognitively know that impacts the planet and my larger being, but it's like my body also knows, like, and it actually physically responds to that. And that's just an example. I'm just using plastic as an example.
Yeah.
But the responses to be able to act on behalf of life, act on behalf of climate change, to shift and change and move and create a better future, becomes so innate and organic when you are embodied and when you are connected to the earth and you're connected to your ecological self. And so the course is really about that deep returning, but also giving people the tools to be able to be embodied, come back home, to deal with some of the emotions that arise, but also to create change. So I put in really practical stuff as well. It's not all of the feeling stuff. It's also, how do you run a project? How do you do it? What is the importance of community? How do we build it? How do we create resilience and a regenerative culture moving forwards? So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really important in terms of, it's how holding the tension between, giving people the space to feel that, but also providing the practicality for people to be able to put that into action quickly, and then obviously build on that as they become more embodied and more connected to their earth self. I feel like that, but the stepping stones to that's probably going to be a really key part of that course.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I would love to have a chat to you, Karina, because one thing that I did read on your info that you spent a bit of time with Joanna Macy in America, and she's someone that's I've followed a lot in terms of especially the work she does in Buddhism, but also she was one of the pioneers that really connected Buddhist teachings to environmentalism, and I think there's such a deep connection to that where we need awareness to have action, and her ability to really to connect to that. But I would love to get your thoughts on how that was working with her, and what you took from that experience.
Yeah, I was super lucky. I really acknowledge my um yeah, just things lined up for me to be able to be there. And I think sometimes when you're supposed to be in certain spaces, things just align. And so I got really lucky to be able to go over there and do some training with her. And she is profound. She's really profound. But also the team that was around her and the participants that were there, I learned so much
Mm.
from as well. Like, they were ridiculous people who just had such amazing capacity to hold things and to verbalize things. And so I kind of learned from both. It was this immersion intensive that we did. And so I learned from Joanna Macy and her amazing wisdom, and I did the practices alongside her and these people. And then I also learned from these participants who were really another level that I hadn't experienced before, of embodied people, of people who did not separate things and did not try and other people, even when really complex things came up, like some ingrained, racism and stuff like that. And it was really amazing to be able to see that in practice. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
she was amazing. She's got such a way of being, and her words, I just find are so captivating. And I return to her YouTube clips a lot as well, even though I've watched them already, just as a reminder of a way to drop back in. But that training was really key for my development. Like, it was this intense download of everything. Like, I really found I had to spend some time afterwards really integrating that experience because it was so big. Yeah.
Well, I'd imagine that because Joanna, like, if anyone that doesn't know Joanna Maisie, like, she's an older lady now. She'd be getting into her 80s, maybe. You know,
Oh no, she's like 89, 90 or something.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, and she's been doing this work in environmentalism and Buddhist for a long, long time. And she, it's interesting that you say that. I'd imagine she would have it pretty well down pat and would have a good team around her that are really, on the same page. I'd imagine she'd have a really beautiful process of how she does things. But I feel when you spoke before about embodiment of earth and connectedness, like, I think when you get to a point like probably Joanna is, and that it becomes quite profound, as you sort of mentioned, and it becomes really efficient. Like, you don't, as you mentioned with the plastics, you're not thinking about, is this the right decision or not the right decision. As you said, you're just feeling it, and you're living a lot of your life just from intuition and connectedness because you start to know yourself that well. Is that sort of what you're feeling or seeing with some of these people that you're learning from?
Yeah, I think they have they have this profound ability to be able to really feel from that space and live from that space in a very authentic way. And I think that's what I've really found with Joanna, is that she would have taught this stuff so many times.
Yes.
But instead of that becoming mechanical or automatic or disconnected, you could see her feeling it as she was doing it. And so, like, it hadn't lost its poignancy. She's still so much within that. And I think another great example of her as a leader, and I think that's what I'm also trying to do in my course, is I want to help support creating like a different type of leader than what we're really witnessing in our society today. We have people in positions of power in our society that I really feel are not a great example of what a leader should be. And so I'm trying to give space for an emergence of a different type of leader, of a leader that can be vulnerable and strong, can be soft and also and can be wrong, can admit when they're wrong, can be humble and expansive, and all of these things, instead of it being this really dominating power down approach of leadership, or this have to be non-feeling. It's like an honoring of the whole human experience, but in a leadership space. And for me, Joanna also helped that alongside many other people, where there was never that power dynamic of her being more important than me. Like, when the other people were teaching, she, I think she was 89 at that time, and so an 89-year-old came and we were always sitting on the ground when we were learning, and she would come and sit on the ground next to me and be in reverence and listening deeply to the person who was presenting. And so it's that, not the more important than, but just the equal to. And I think that's what I'm hoping to share in my work, is I'm not teaching, like, okay, I'm sharing information and practices and strategies and stuff, but I'm not teaching people anything that they don't already know. A lot of it is so alive in your body. It's just that we've forgotten it. And there's such deep wisdom that's within ourselves. And all I'm doing is just helping awaken that. I'm not making people anything. I'm just allowing them to come into their fullest expression, but within their fullest expression and fullest power within context of these times is also the part of it. Because I know a lot of people do work about people coming into their power and come into spaces of leadership, and I honor that work. It's so deeply important. But I think one of the key parts that sometimes is missed is within context of these times. So being able to come into your power and your soul's work and your expression within context of these times. So be able to be doing your soul service within the complexity of these times, and be able to offer something that is in alignment with your soul's work, but also in alignment with the change that needs to occur for us to be able to move forward and heal and create a future that's life-sustaining.
Yeah, and there's a lot there to unpack, because I that leadership space that you're talking about, and talking about trying to create a new leader that's vulnerable, that's open, that's expansive, and you talk about Joanna, and then threading that conversation to earlier when we're talking about elders, that for that person, for that leader to feel really comfortable in that space of vulnerability, of openness, you need to be really comfortable with yourself, and not needing to try to be someone that you're not trying to attach to something, and there's a really good relationship with the ego, and that again comes back to the conversation we had before about just wanting to give and being okay to just continue to give. You will receive naturally, but not giving to receive, but giving just to give, and to hold that space which you're talking about, that connects to the context of what's needed right now. Because I think what you're saying, but what I feel is that if we just can give from a real place of authenticity and openness, it will be the right thing to give based on what's needed for the moment. That's quite powerful. I'd just love to get your thoughts on giving, and the other parts about giving. And I'd love to talk, because I was reading your stuff, is around the giving and the ritual and ceremony, and just how important do you see that has been for us as as community, as people, to come back to it and start to introduce a quality of ritual and ceremony back into our lives and our practices.
Definitely. Yeah, so in regards to giving, I think that I think we can look to nature to be able to, and obviously we are nature as well, but when I'm referring to nature, I mean the more than human world, as a way to be able to be re-inspired about the cycles of giving and receiving. And we can learn so much by witnessing and apprenticing to nature in the more than human world, to be able to really understand and return to that cycle of giving and receiving, because there is so much that I have received from doing this work, like so ridiculously much. And that's not why I went into it, but I think people always come under this pretense of the lack mind frame and the sacrifice that needs to happen for them to be able to take action, or for them to have to give, and oh, woe is me about giving up my time to make these, to do this action, or to be part of this campaign, or to do this project, or to be more plastic free, or whatever it is. And in that, they miss and aren't able to identify some of the gifts of what they receive in that. And there is so much that I have received, and I share this story a bit, but one of my dear friends, who is very similar to me in our thinking, and we were speaking about this work, and he said, do you ever wish you could go back and not feel the stuff, and not do the work, and to be a bit more in mainstream society? And we both looked at each other and we're like, no, we would never ever go back, because I have never been more in love with life. I've found different depths of love that I've never been able to experience in my life. I've felt more at home, and I've received so many amazing connections, but from people, but also just in regards to the earth. There's a sacredness in every moment now that I didn't have before, that is so nourishing for me, and it's so exciting and such an honor to be a part of, and I would never give that up, because it's so beautiful. And so yes, we give, but there's also so much that we receive, and I think there needs to be that reframing of how we look at giving. Not that it does come from a really selfless place, and when you do come from such a selfless and connected space, then automatically you just receive so much in return. And so I love that beautiful cycle of giving and receiving that just organically happens. And in
And it's challenging work, isn't it, Karina? Like what I, in the work that I do, listening, like sometimes if when you had, I'm picturing that because I had the same conversation with my wife about, if we weren't feeling like we were living so from our values so deeply, and would it be easier just to go back to more of a mainstream life? Like we've had that. I think that's a common chat that people can sometimes have that are on similar paths. But you're right, you can't go back because of what you know and what you've received from this way of living. Um, but it is, I feel it's quite challenging sometimes, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because you're sort of at that, and you are definitely at that starting point of trying to create monumental shifts in people's lives, and it's not just an easy grab of running something that you know that the masses are going to love, that is an easy hit. You're really sort of getting into creating shifts in people, and connecting them back to their true selves. And I'd love to know how you sit with that, because I'd imagine that there's a bit of both.
There is. There's definitely a bit of both. And I like to share this in my leadership course around wherever you're making change, or whenever you are making, like being a leader in change, you're going to be having one foot in the old world,
Yeah.
one foot in the new world, and you're in a space of tension. And that tension is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually, that tension is required, because that means that that's where you're on that edge of shifting and moving people. But in doing that, you're also sometimes not accompanied by other people, and that can sometimes, most of the time, depending on your area, there's a lot of other people doing it. And then also depending not on your, like if you don't have an area that is well trampled in, and you're really like being that illuminator of that space, then you will be the first one, or one of the first few walking that. And that means that you will be potentially alone or with very few others. And I think that can be sometimes a bit of a struggle, because you're neither belonging in the old world, and the new world is not quite established. And so you belong in this in between space, which is where your power is, but it also can be kind of hard at times.
Yeah.
And very sometimes tiring. And that's why I also stress in the course that I do, and in general when I'm speaking to people or coaching people, around having that deep connection with the earth, but also having those important self-care rituals that nourish you to be able to have that resilience to sit in that space of tension again and again, and to know that I think there's also that need to be more gentler on ourselves, if for those who are maybe in newer spaces, because you can't, not that you should ever compare yourself to anyone, but you really can't compare yourself to anyone else, because you're more likely going to fall down multiple times more than someone who's moving into an area that's already had an established path. Like they might be a leader in that area, but if someone's already walked that path and showed them where the hiccups are, they're more likely not to stumble as much. And so when you are really utilizing and demonstrating a new way, you're going to come across more stumbling and more failures. And that's actually like part of that path and that journey, and that's okay. And just really honoring that, like, it's not going to look as smooth as someone else's journey due to you being on that edge. And then that's actually good, and that's part of the change that you're creating.
Yeah. And I think that, again, circles back, Karina, into what we were talking about before, and something that's resonated a lot with me. But I feel like this conversation we've had has been themed with our need of connection, but also a need for support and guidance from others. And, again, connecting to the work that you do and that I do, that you almost try to hold that space for some people, to guide them as an elder would.
And I think that actually, to reflect back on something we were speaking about earlier, I really saw that lack of elders in the training that I did with Joanna Macy. It was really great for me to be able to almost re-establish my view on that, because we haven't had people in that space in the Western societies that are non-Aboriginal. We don't have those people playing that role as much. It means that people who are not really of that appropriate age have had to step into an elder role. And I really saw that, like, with I had a coach and a mentor who I journeyed with for 2 years in deep ecology when I first started, Claire Dunn. And she really spoke about how it was odd that she was now being referred to and looked to as an elder, who's actually, her age is quite young. She's in her, I think, late 30s or something. But that she's, because of that lack of that space, that people of different ages are having to step into that role. And I really saw that at Joanna Macy's training when we were doing some circle generations work, and they did like a circle of under 35s in the center and over 35s in the outside, and it was around witnessing the younger generation and holding space for their expression of what's happening in these times. And so it was part of that emotional space that they hold. But one of them really spoke to it, and it really has resonated with me since. And he was looking around the circle, and at this particular training, and this is not generalized, but this was just for this training, the young people of that training were profound. Like, I learned so much from them. They were such ridiculously old, wise souls that I'd never come across people who held that much amazing wisdom at that age before. That was my first experience to really feel that. But he was looking around the inside circle. He was one of the young ones, and he really spoke it. And he was like, I see more elders in this inner circle than I do with the outer circle. And that was just due to the age group that was there, and the people who were holding the wisdom in that particular group happened to be those of the younger ones. And that's not saying in general that that's how it is, but I think what that opened up for me was the concept of that because of that lack, we're having people, it's not an age thing anymore, that we're having people step into those roles of various ages when they shouldn't have to, but because of that lack of that guidance and that role, that they've had to move into that space. And so now I look in general a very broader view around who are my elders, and instead of just looking for those who are older than me or in that older age group and trying to find them in there where I haven't been able to find them, I really look at the larger spectrum of people way younger than me, 19-year-olds and things like that, up to a lot older than me, and go, who are the people who are holding the wisdom that can light the way at the moment, and seeing them as my elders, and kind of defining that for myself, because unfortunately we don't have that role being well filled in our Western society a lot.
Yeah, and that's an interesting place to talk to it from, because traditionally elders are elders because of experience and of lived experience, whereas what you're talking to is some of these elders are stepping into that void through, a lot of them through book knowledge, just what they've read, not through actually what they've experienced, because traditionally they actually haven't had the age to experience it firsthand, but they're well versed on reading about it. And that's an interesting place because of the void that we've had from previous generations of a lack of book knowledge or wisdom and of lived experience, especially connected to nature, and yeah, there's this void that people are trying to fill or being filled without the lived experience of doing as much. That's an interesting place to hold it from.
Yeah, I think some of it is books, and some of it is when people, certain younger crew, have this deep connection with the earth, and there's a lot of wisdom that is shared, like when we open up to deep time, where we bring in ancestors and future generations, when we honor the wisdom of different animal species and the earth around us. There is actually this profound wisdom that can be held from such a young age, that is not so much theirs, but they're being used as a gateway to be able to share that. But yeah, they don't have that same lived experience for sure. But I do think that sometimes that's also, it is books as well. But some of the ones that I've met have been because they've been kind of able to tap into that larger collective and ecological wisdom that is actually we're all able to connect into that, but we've just kind of morphed away from. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Karina, like, where can people sort of get your courses? Where can they find you? And if they love the conversation, get more information and get involved in what you do.
Yeah, definitely. I would love for people to come join me on any of my courses. The Embodied Earth Leadership is really accessible for anyone and everyone. So it's online, so you can be anywhere in the world to do it. And it's self-led, but also we have times where we drop in a community, and it's a really big growing community. So you can access that via my website, which is Karina Donkers, or www.karinadonkers.com, or follow me on Instagram, which is like at Karina Donkers. And yeah, I offer different things like retreats or coaching or various different spaces and educations and ebooks and things like that I'm going to be sharing, because I really want to be as great a service at the moment to people, so as I possibly can. So I really love the honor of being able to journey with people at different times.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for the chat, Karina. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciated the insights into deep ecology and just that understanding of connectedness and embodiment, which was really nice, and I think really needed for this particular time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to have a bit of a chat.
No worries. Thank you.